I never used to notice the squeak in the door until that morning. It gave a little groan when I pushed it open, the kind of sound you'd ignore unless you were living in the apartment above and heard it a dozen times a day. The downstairs smelled faintly of coffee and rain. She must have left the window cracked overnight. I had my mug in one hand, my phone in the other, thumb hovering over a half-written text to no one in particular. I did that a lot. Start messages, stop, delete. The blue bubble with my words just sat there, unsent, like a thought I couldn't say out loud. She was at the kitchen counter with a screwdriver, dark hair pinned up, but slipping loose in small strands. Mid-40s maybe. I'd never asked. She was my landlady, technically, but the way she moved around the house, slow, deliberate, made it feel like I was visiting a relative I didn't know well. "Door again?" she asked without looking up. Her voice was calm, low. "Yeah. Thought I'd tighten the hinge before it falls off completely." I tried to make it sound like a joke. A small smile flickered at the corner of her mouth. "Good idea." I crouched at the doorframe, screwdriver in hand. It was a nothing moment, just a loose hinge and a creaking door, but the space felt charged in a way I couldn't explain. The house was quiet except for the tick of the wall clock and the rain softening on the roof. She poured herself coffee and set the pot down too gently, like she didn't want to disturb anything. I glanced at her hands. Neat, unpolished nails, a faint scar on one knuckle. My eyes flicked away before she noticed. "You drink it black, right?" she asked suddenly. I blinked. Yeah." I remembered," she said, sliding a mug toward me without meeting my eyes. That small gesture landed harder than it should have. Nobody remembered my coffee order. Not at the office, not at the cafe down the street. I tightened the last screw. "Thanks." She leaned against the counter, arms folded. "You moved in 2 months ago, and you're already fixing things. You're spoiling me." I laughed quietly, more like a breath. "We're just paying rent and screws." For a moment, neither of us said anything. She looked at the window where the rain streaked down, then at me. I folded the paper napkin I'd brought downstairs into a neat square, then another. It was something to do with my hands. "You're from out of town?" she asked. "Yeah. Just work, mostly." "Must be lonely." I hesitated. "Sometimes." Another silence. Not awkward exactly, but heavy enough to notice. She checked her phone, then set it face down. "Well, the door should stop squeaking for a while," she said softly. "Guess so." I stood, brushing off my hands. I wasn't sure whether to leave or stay. She looked like she had something else to say, but changed her mind. I went upstairs a few minutes later, the hinge quiet behind me. My unsent text was still on the screen. I deleted it, opened the Notes app instead, and typed her name without meaning to. Just as I set the phone down, it buzzed, a message from her number I didn't remember giving her. "If you're not busy tonight, could you help me with the back gate?" It stuck. I stared at it longer than I should have, thumb hovering. The rain tapping against the window like a clock I hadn't noticed was ticking. I told myself it was just a gate. The back gate leaned at a tired angle, half swallowed by ivy. When I stepped outside that evening, the air was damp and smelled of cut grass. She was already there, pulling at the latch with her sleeve over her hand. A small lamp on the porch cast a gold circle around her feet. "Sorry to drag you out," she said. "It's been sticking for weeks." "It's fine," I said. "Better than sitting upstairs staring at my phone." She smiled, but not at me, more at the space between us. I noticed she'd changed her shirt, soft gray cotton with sleeves pushed up. A thin silver bracelet clicked lightly against her wrist when she moved. I crouched by the hinge, testing the screws. "It's just rusted," I murmured. "Easy fix." "Everything's easy if you know how," she said quietly. We worked in silence for a while, me loosening bolts, her holding the flashlight at an awkward angle. Once, our fingers brushed as she shifted it, and we both drew back a fraction, pretending we hadn't. The house loomed behind us, all dark windows and rainwater dripping off the eaves. "You've been here long?" I asked. 10 years. Bought it after the divorce." She said it like she was reading a grocery list, but her thumb pressed into the flashlight button until it squeaked. I didn't look up. "Sorry. That's none of my. It's fine. People stop asking after a while." A pause. "It was messy, if that's what you're wondering." I shook my head. I wasn't. But I was. Not about the divorce, but about who she'd been before this quiet house and its creaking doors. The bolt came free with a groan. She let out a breath. "You're good at this," she said. "I grew up fixing things. My dad left early most mornings. My mom couldn't wait for him to do the repairs, so I learned. I hadn't meant to share that. It just slipped out, like a stone rolling downhill." She tilted the light so it glowed on my hands. "That's not nothing," she said softly. The gate swung open easily now. She set the flashlight down, then brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. "You must miss them," she said. "I guess." I wiped my palms on my jeans. "Mostly I miss the noise. This place feels too quiet sometimes." We stood there, the gate open like a door to some other place we wouldn't go. Her face was in shadow, but her eyes found mine. I had the sudden, disorienting sense of being known, not just looked at, but seen. Inside my head, 100 thoughts crowded. She's older. She's your landlady. She probably has rules about this. It's just coffee. It's just a gate. "I could make tea," she said finally, almost to herself. I followed her in. The kitchen smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and something warm I couldn't name. She filled the kettle while I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Our reflection shimmered in the dark window over the sink. Her hair down now, my shoulders slightly turned toward her. "Chamomile okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. My voice came out lower than I meant. She set 2 cups on the table. We sat without speaking, steam rising between us like another person. I folded the paper tag of my tea bag into a small triangle. She traced the rim of her cup with a finger, eyes down. "You know," she said after a long silence, "when I first started renting this place out, I swore I'd keep it strictly business. No small talk, no entanglements. But you—" She stopped, shook her head. "Forget it." I swallowed. "I'm not trying to make it complicated." "I know." She looked at me then, really looked. "That's what worries me." I didn't know what to do with that. The clock on the wall ticked loud enough to feel. Outside, a car hissed past on wet pavement. She reached for the sugar, then hesitated. Instead, she nudged the small plate of biscuits toward me. Our fingers brushed again, deliberate this time, or maybe just slow. I don't know why this moment stayed with me. I thought, staring at her hand near mine. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. She drew her hand back, but her gaze lingered, soft and steady, like a question she wasn't ready to ask. That I started finding excuses to be downstairs. Bringing in the mail. Asking about the trash schedule. Small, ordinary things that didn't need saying out loud. She never called me out, but I could feel her noticing. One afternoon, I came home early from work. The house was quiet except for a radio playing softly in the kitchen, some old song with a scratchy saxophone. She was standing at the counter, drying a dish with slow, careful movements. "You're home early," she said without turning. "Meeting got canceled." She nodded, still drying. The dish slipped once, clinked against the sink. Her shoulders stiffened, then relaxed. "I was just about to make tea," she said. I stepped closer. "I can help." Our hands moved around each other without touching. Kettle, cups, tea bags. The familiarity of it felt dangerous, like standing too close to a ledge. "Long day?" she asked. "Not really." I hesitated. "Just quiet." Something flickered across her face, recognition maybe. She reached for a spoon, then stopped. "I might need to change the locks upstairs. Some tenants," she caught herself. "Never mind." It felt like a retreat, like she was pulling back to the safe script of landlady and tenant. I leaned against the counter, unsure. Did I do something wrong? "No," she said quickly. Too quickly. "You didn't." Silence again. The radio hissed between songs. She turned off the burner and poured hot water, her hand steady but her eyes on the floor. The front door opened suddenly. A woman's voice called up the stairwell. "Mom?" I stepped back as if burned. A younger woman, mid-20s maybe, appeared in the doorway, shaking rain off her jacket. Same eyes as hers. "Oh," the daughter said, seeing me. "Hi. This is my tenant," she said evenly. "He's been helping with repairs." I nodded, throat dry. "Hi." The daughter smiled politely, then glanced between us. Something unreadable passed over her face. "I'll just be upstairs," I said, already moving toward the stairs. But she stopped me with a quiet "wait." I turned. She was holding a spoon, knuckles white around it. Don't, don't feel like you have to disappear, she said softly. Her daughter was busy hanging her jacket. For a second, it was just us in that kitchen again. I stepped closer without meaning to. Close enough to see the tiny freckle on her collarbone. She lifted her eyes, then dropped them. We both knew we should move, speak, do anything to break the moment. Instead, she set the spoon down slowly, her fingers brushing mine as she did. Not an accident. It was nothing, a touch, a heartbeat, but my whole body registered it like an alarm. I opened my mouth, some half-formed confession on my tongue. Her daughter turned then, and the moment snapped shut like a door that we started taking the same route to the corner shop. At first it was coincidence. I'd time my errands to avoid the evening rush, but soon I was waiting for the sound of her keys at the door. We'd fall into step without saying where we were going. That evening the air was soft and heavy, the kind that makes streetlights glow whiter. She carried a canvas bag in one hand, her phone in the other. I carried nothing. We walked in silence until the main road noise thinned behind us. You don't have to keep helping with things, she said suddenly. I mean with the house. I don't mind. That's not the point. She stopped at a crosswalk, waiting for the light even though no cars were coming. Her shoulders were drawn up, chin tucked. I keep thinking someone's going to misunderstand, she said quietly. I stared at the street. Someone like your daughter? A small, surprised laugh left her mouth. She notices more than she says. I didn't know what to do with my hands, so I shoved them into my jacket pockets. It's nothing, I said. She glanced at me then, eyes sharp. Is it? The light changed. We crossed without talking. We reached the park, a small one with a crooked bench under a tree. She sat first, setting her bag at her feet. I sat at the far end, then shifted a little closer without thinking. She thinks I'm lonely, she said finally. My daughter. That's why she drops by unannounced. I picked at a splinter on the bench. Are you? She gave a small, humorless smile. I don't know. Some days. Mostly I just manage. A breeze lifted a strand of her hair. She didn't brush it back. I didn't come here to complicate your life, I said. My voice sounded raw in my ears. You didn't, she said softly. I let it happen. Silence again. The kind that feels like standing in a doorway you're not sure you're allowed to enter. I keep thinking about that night with the gate. I blurted. About your hand on mine. Her eyes flicked to mine, then away. That was nothing. It didn't feel like nothing. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the bench. She looked like she wanted to stand, but didn't. You're young, she said. You don't know what you want. I laughed quietly, a shaky sound. I know what I want. She exhaled slowly, staring at the ground. Don't. We sat there, two separate lines almost intersecting. My heart thudded in my throat. I used to think, she said, her voice barely above the breeze, that after the divorce I'd be invisible. Safer that way. But you, she stopped. I leaned closer, not touching. Me? You make me forget to be invisible, she whispered. I couldn't tell if it was a confession or a warning. I don't want to mess up your life, I said. And I don't want to mess up yours. We both looked out at the empty playground where a swing shifted in the wind. The sound of its chain creaked like a slow metronome. I'm not ashamed of wanting you. Almost slipped out of me. Instead I said, sometimes I wonder what you're thinking. She turned then, really turned, and for a second her face was open, unguarded. I'm thinking about how close we're sitting, she said softly. I felt it then, the inch of space, the way our knees nearly touched. My hand twitched against the bench slat. Her breath caught. Somewhere in the distance a dog barked. She glanced toward the noise like it was an excuse. We should go, she said. But she didn't stand. I opened my mouth, closed it. Her eyes met mine again, a question flickering there. Not asked out loud. Not yet. She stopped answering my texts. Not rudely, just, later than usual, clipped. The space between replies widened like a hairline crack. I told myself she was busy, that her daughter was visiting again, that this was inevitable. Still, I caught myself pausing at the top of the stairs, listening for the sound of her kettle or the low murmur of the radio. Nothing. On the third evening, I didn't happen to be downstairs. I stayed in my apartment, phone face down on the table. The air smelled of dust and rain. My unsent message sat in the draft box. Are you okay? I kept moving the cursor over the send button and back. The next morning I saw her through the kitchen window. She was on the phone, pacing. Her voice was low, urgent. She saw me, hesitated, then closed the curtain. Later, a text, going away for a few days. Daughter needs me. Back soon. No smiley, no question. I wrote back, safe travels, and deleted it before sending. 2 days passed. I bought my own groceries, fixed my own dinner, didn't go near the back gate. I tried to convince myself the quiet was a relief. It wasn't. On the 4th day, she appeared at the bottom of the stairs, knocking lightly. Your rent receipt, she said, holding out an envelope. Her hair was damp, her expression unreadable. Thanks, I said, trying to sound normal. She didn't step in. Listen, she started, then stopped. I should tell you my ex is back in town. He's been calling. I nodded slowly. Okay. I'm not sure what he wants. My daughter thinks we should talk. I don't. She looked away. I didn't want you to hear it from someone else. A car honked outside. We both flinched. Right, I said. Thanks for telling me. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod and turned to leave. I wanted to call her back, to ask if everything we'd built over cups of tea and quiet walks meant nothing. But I didn't. I stood at the window after she left, watching the rain blur her figure until she disappeared. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed with my phone in my hand. Drafted a message. I miss our walks. Deleted it. Drafted another. Do you want me to leave? Deleted that too. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. Downstairs, a chair scraped softly against the kitchen floor, then silence that it was almost midnight when I heard the knock. Not urgent, just 2 soft taps. When I opened the door, she was standing there, wrapped in a long sweater, hair loose, eyes tired. She didn't wait to be invited. She stepped inside and closed the door behind her. Sorry, she said. Couldn't sleep. I gestured toward the table. Tea. She nodded. We moved around each other in the small kitchen like 2 halves of a routine we'd forgotten. Kettle, mugs, tea bags. Neither of us spoke until the steam rose. She sat down, clasping her hands around the mug. I've been avoiding you, she said quietly. I noticed. I thought pulling back would make it easier. Her voice cracked, barely. It didn't. I stayed standing, leaning against the counter. Because of your ex? She shook her head. Because of me. Because I'm 43 and you're 27. Because my daughter watches me like I'm going to fall. I sat opposite her. I'm not a kid. I know. That's what scares me. She looked up then, eyes shining but steady. You're kind. You fix things. You make me laugh. And she trailed off. I like it too much. The kettle clicked as it cooled. The sound felt loud. I kept thinking, I said slowly, that if I didn't say anything, it would stay simple. But it hasn't been simple for a while. She gave a small, sad smile. No, it hasn't. We sat there, both hands on mugs, shoulders leaning but not touching. I don't know where this goes, she said. Me neither. Silence again. Outside, rain tapped against the window. I'm tired of being invisible, she whispered. But I don't know how to be seen without wrecking everything. I reached across the table, stopping just short of her hand. I'm here, I said softly. That's all I can offer. Just here. Her fingers moved a fraction closer until they touched mine. Not a grab, not even a hold. Just a soft contact, like a test of reality. She exhaled, a sound between a sigh and a release. Okay, she said. The word hung there, small but solid. We stayed like that, fingertips touching, tea cooling between us. No promises, no explanations. Just 2 people at a kitchen table, trying not to disappear. For the first time in weeks, the silence didn't feel like an edge. It felt like a beginning that we never sat down and said we were together. It just started happening in small, unremarkable ways. A month later, the back gate still swung freely on its new hinge. Her daughter still dropped by, but not as often. My coffee mug began to live downstairs next to hers. We still kept 2 sets of everything, keys, mugs, chairs, but the space between them kept shrinking. Most mornings we crossed paths at 8:47 a.m. Me leaving for work, her rinsing a mug. It became a kind of clock neither of us acknowledged. She'd hand me a thermos of black coffee without looking up from the sink. I'd nod, say thanks, and slip it into my bag like it was always mine. Sometimes after work, we walked to the park again. We'd sit on the same crooked bench under the tree, a canvas bag of groceries at her feet. The swing still creaked in the wind. This time there was no question hovering. We'd already let the silence decide for us. She'd lean her shoulder lightly against mine. I'd fold a napkin into neat squares out of habit, then tuck it into her bag without thinking. Her ex faded back into the background. Not a dramatic exit, just a slow tapering of calls. The daughter seemed to relax around me too, like she'd decided I wasn't another mistake waiting to happen. No one said it out loud, but the house felt less like two stacked apartments and more like a single home with a lot of doors. Evenings were different now. I'd come down the stairs, not with an excuse, but because she'd left the kettle out for me. We'd drink chamomile at the kitchen table, mugs steaming between us. We still didn't talk about us much. We talked about the neighborhood, the squeak in the upstairs window, a book she was reading, a recipe I'd tried. But the quiet had changed. It wasn't heavy anymore. It was a kind of shared space. She started putting her hair down earlier in the evening. I stopped keeping my phone face down. We still had our own rooms, our own mornings, but at night, when she passed me the biscuits, her fingers would stay a moment longer on mine, as if we'd both forgotten to pull away. One rainy Saturday she asked, "Do you miss your old life?" I thought about my half-written texts, the empty apartment, the silence that used to feel like an edge. Not the way I thought I would, I said. She smiled faintly. Good. No declarations. No promises. Just good. On the way back from the park one evening, she stopped at the bench and brushed a leaf off the seat before sitting. It's weird, she said. I used to sit here alone and imagine what it would be like to have someone next to me. Now you're here, and I still can't explain it. I sat beside her, watching the streetlights flicker on. You don't have to. She leaned her head against my shoulder. Okay. I thought of all the little moments that had built this. The squeak of a hinge, the back gate at dusk, the smell of black coffee at 8:47 a.m., a daughter's suspicious glance, an unsent text. Nothing cinematic, nothing scripted, just a series of pauses that had finally lined up. I didn't feel like I'd reached an ending. I felt like I'd stepped into a life already in progress, one I'd get to help repair, one quiet screw at a time. She squeezed my hand once, light and sure. No one else in the park would have noticed. But I did. And that small, almost invisible gesture felt like the whole story in miniature. Ordinary, and yet the thing I'd been waiting for without knowing it.